This is Conspirinormal.
Okay, guys, welcome to Conspirinormal. Glad that we're doing the show a little bit late in the week for us, but you guys won't know that because you'll get it on time. But we kind of had to reschedule a few things and shuffle some things around, but we have two of our favorite people with us tonight.
A little bit of help from our friends.
That's right, little help from our friends. We've got Timothy Renner from the great Strange Familiars podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And the man that I think everybody knows out there, Mr. Seriah Azkath from Where Did the Road Go?
Hi.
Hello, Seriah. Thank you for coming on.
No problem.
We really love both of you guys' shows. You guys are like our sister shows. And so we just thought that we'd just have a nice little, I guess, jam session, so to speak, and just talk about various things. But first of all, what have you guys been up to as we kind of come out of this whole COVID thing?
For the last 2 hours, I've been sitting in the dark.
Mm-hmm. Not by choice.
Not by choice. It's a power went out.
Yeah.
Actually,
right.
I am very grateful that I have, books I needed to read on Kindle.
Yes.
Because otherwise I'd just be sitting in the dark.
Do you not have any candles or anything, Seriah?
Yeah,
I do.
You don't have anything from your rituals?
Yeah, I just figured you'd have some black candles going anyway.
I don't really use candles. I have a nice, powerful LED, like handheld light, and the rest of the time I'm just in the dark. Like right now, it's pitch dark in here.
You're the one that gets the most natural disasters of any of us.
Yeah, we did have some tornadoes last
all the
year,
time.
but I think you win with that.
Yeah, but your tornadoes were way worse than my natural disasters.
Yeah. You just get your your basement flooded and
right.
What's the deal with that? So there's like a lot of groundwater seeping up or something? Because when you told me that you were out of power, I thought you had like an electrical storm and you were getting a whole bunch of rain and that was why. But so I'm sure this is very exciting for the listeners to know about Seriah's problems with but I'm just curious, you got a bunch of, is there like a well or an aquifer on your property or something?
When they built the extension on my house back in like 1995 for my grandmother, they blocked the natural drainage path.
Oh.
And so part of that water now drains intentionally into that part's basement, which is not a big deal anymore because anything that was worth anything was destroyed. So that basement is essentially empty. But the front basement is where it also started causing water to come in because that water now was blocked from its normal path.
Okay. So then it's just going to flood. So you've just got this pump like a sump pump that just keeps it from flooding down in the basement constantly.
Right. And the times it has flooded the front basement are usually completely almost supernatural level storms.
Uh-huh.
And there's nothing that any pump's going to do to that.
Right. Yeah, you get these like actual floods and shit.
Right. And on the top of a hill. You've been here.
Yes, I have. I've not seen it. You've done some renovations, I think. You got like a whole studio in the house now, don't you?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So, Seriah, you do Where Did the Road Go, for anybody that doesn't know. And then you've got a couple of shows that you do. It's like metal.
I just do one.
Oh, okay. Well, there's another one you help out on.
Yeah, I help out on the Metallic Onslaught. Not my show. I do The Last Exit for the Lost, which is mostly metal, but it's also like industrial, goth, all kinds of different stuff all mixed together. Anything that's like heavy and underground or dark.
Yeah. I got to sit in on one of one of those shows.
Yeah, you were there when because we came back from Albatwitch from seeing Tim.
That's right. That was a hell of a trip. So
yeah, you drove up here from Gettysburg, I think.
Well, what I did was I drove up from DC.
Okay.
And I stayed with Peter Robbins.
Right.
For like that Friday night, and then I go to your place, which like Seriah says he lives in Ithaca, but it's like 30 minutes away. Or you're like 40 miles away from it. And like, guys,
I'm 20 miles away from it.
Seriah literally lives in the middle of nowhere, y'all. It's like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre world up there. You don't know, like,
Not quite. Plus, there's nice, pretty lakes on either side.
oh yeah, it's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. And so we drive down to what city was that, Tim? Or town?
Columbia.
Columbia, Pennsylvania, which is southern Pennsylvania. It's like a 4.5 hour drive.
Yep.
And then we drive back that night. And then I do Where Did the Road Go with you in studio.
After getting lost and leaving me on the air by myself for a few minutes.
Yeah, I got lost. And you had to send somebody to come get me.
Yep, my sound guy, Nathan.
And then, I spent another 3 hours with you over there at the studio.
Yep. Because
So-
you hung around for the band that played, which was some national act from California.
Yeah, they were like from San Francisco or something.
San Francisco.
God.
Yeah,
How do you remember that, man? That's crazy.
I have no idea.
He's a metal encyclopedia.
I'm not. This information just randomly, like I'm like it had a weird name. Apothecary. I don't know why I remember it, but that's
That's who it was. Yeah. And so I think I got back to Peter Robbins' house at like 3:00 in the morning.
right.
Something crazy like that. So that was quite a trip. I actually that's where I met you too, Tim. And
and then you came back and we went to Gettysburg.
yeah, we went to Gettysburg. Yeah, hung out with you, and it was like about a week later.
Was it a week later? Okay.
Yeah. I came back and hung out with you, James. Went to that bridge
Yes, we've been
in Gettysburg.
we've actually been going to that bridge multiple times. We have an upcoming special episode. We're going to do it a little differently than our normal episodes. So we've been working on it. I thought that bridge was a joke because the history with it is impossible. It's one of these local legends things. And then we've been having some really strange stuff go on there. One night that bridge just went nuts on us, like total poltergeist activity. The bridge is banging. There's banging underneath the bridge. There's knocks happening all around us. It was bizarre. It was really, really.
So I think we were there it was 7 to probably 8:00 at night. We were hanging out there for probably 20-30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go a little later in the night?
Yeah, we've been
first
there.
time?
We've been there early. We've been there late. Usually the key is to spend a lot of time there. And if there's a lot of people around, it doesn't seem to, not much seems to go down. But if we can get there alone, usually by 11 p.m. midnight, most people clear out. And when people do show up, they tend to come and they'll stay for 5 minutes and then leave. So you usually just wait people out. But it's going to be quite a series. We've done some neat stuff there.
So no natural disasters down your way, just supernatural ones?
Yeah, I guess. I don't. Depends on the definition of disaster.
Yeah, so I've been listening to Strange Familiars, and really the best one lately that I heard, I got to give this lady credit, the one that said she saw Flannel Man 2 different times, this entity that followed her.
Still need to narrow it down. This could be any number of my shows.
Wow. Okay. Well, it was a pretty recent one, and it was called "He Just Stood There."
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. No, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, she was a good witness. Yeah. I mean, they're all good. Not too, but yeah, she had some cool stories.
Yeah. So she basically said that she saw Flannel Man in 1999 in the middle of the woods or something.
He was just standing there, and she kind of got freaked out and kept going down the path and turned around, and he had moved 30 yards or whatever in a second or two, and she didn't even hear him. Suddenly he's standing in the path, and that really freaked her out, and she kind of fast walked home, I think, from that.
Yeah, she seemed to have a lot of stuff kind of fall on her in her life. There was a lot going on there.
Well, that's the thing that keeps coming up with these multiple experiencers, where they tell these stories about, every house they've lived in has been haunted, and at some point I just stop them and say, well, what's the common denominator here?
Right.
It's you, it's not the house. And that's not to take a thing away from their stories. I'm just saying, maybe look at this at another angle. I think that was the case with her. I don't know whether she's particularly sensitive or it's just whatever. I think it was her as much as it was the locations she was in.
Yeah. So she was actually here in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. Did she ever tell you like where that was? You can tell me off there if you want.
I mean, she didn't give me exact. I know it was somewhere near the Great Smokies, but
okay. So it's East Tennessee, and she said that she saw Flannel Man in like this like house that was on the property, just like also staring at her.
She basically went down to help a friend of hers whose mom was ailing, and she wanted a break from where she was, and she goes to stay long term with her on this property, and they had a couple cabins and a main house, and she's walking to the woman left, and she was going to pick up her daughter for her at the bus stop, and she's walking to the bus stop and looks up to the main house and sees the same guy she saw in the woods staring out the window from the house.
Wow.
Red flannel shirt and everything. Yeah.
So what do you think is going on there, Tim? Do you think that she was like attracting these things to her, or just like, do you think that there was a warning that was being said or given, or just like this thing is like following her around, or?
Well, this is where did the road go territory, but her life was in pretty much pretty stressful upheaval, I think, at least the first time. And the second time she was really helping someone, I think, basically transition from life to death. She's basically helping this woman take care of her mother.
Liminality.
So, I'm sorry?
Liminality.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, that's, certainly part of it. I mean, that's part of the stew that makes up these encounters. The other part might be her. As far as what Flannel Man is, what this guy is, I wish I had a clear answer because I'm writing a book on it. It'd be really nice to have a last chapter and tell everybody what he is, but I don't know. And he just shows up at weird times for people. Certainly
somebody needs to ask him.
Yeah, well, I think some people have tried. I think that's what who are the two girls that you had on your show that I had on too?
Yes, Natalie and Heather.
Yes. I think that's their project. They're working on asking him.
Well, that wasn't Flannel Man specifically.
Not specifically. That he does wear a check shirt, but it's not the normal color. I think it's a blue checked or something instead of red.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
It's a different version of Flannel Man.
Yeah, he's in the blue core.
He's the
Which
Crip.
connects more to Fey culture than anything else.
That's what it kind of seemed like to me as well. Like there was very much like a kind of a trickster-ish kind of element to that, to those ladies' stories too.
Mm-hmm.
Much more so than in the story that we've been talking about.
Well, we had one on the patron show this month, and it was Barbara from the 6 Degrees of John Keel podcast, and she said, I had this crazy dream and had to do sort of with flannel. I'm like, all right, come on and tell it. So she was on the patron show this month, and she tells a story about waking up, and she's in sleep paralysis, and she sees this shadow person there, like typical, as they describe, shadow person, darker than the night around it, kind of blacker than black thing. But it's holding a mirror. It's holding like an infinity mirror that looks like it goes back, for infinity. Like you can see into it. It just looks like it goes back and back and back and back. And holding it over her husband, I think. Her husband's asleep, and she's kind of seeing this as she's in sleep paralysis. And then it turns it around, and the back side of it is buffalo plaid, red plaid, the back side of this mirror. So she's like, I don't know if that counts as Flannel Man or not. It's like, I'm counting it.
This was all in a dream?
Sleep paralysis,
Okay.
So jury's out, dream or not. People.
I've been there before, unfortunately.
Yeah, people seem to believe they're awake when it happens, and I mean, having had it myself, it's different than a regular dream. I'll say that. And if you want to argue that it's a dream, not much I could say about it, but it's different than a regular dream.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're totally conscious of your body.
What do you think the symbolism of the plaid of this flannel
Grunge
archetype is? That's it. Question solved. Moving on.
I mean, we joke about that, but by far, I'd say probably 70% of the Flannel Man stories I've collected have been from the 90s.
Yeah.
Now,
it was a common motif in the culture.
Right.
maybe, yeah. I mean, of course, some date from before and a lot date from after, but a lot of them do date from the 90s.
How many of them were actually Mick Foley?
All of them.
Oh, okay.
He
For
gets
anyone who
around.
doesn't know who Mick Foley is, he's a scruffy wrestler who always wears flannel.
Yes.
Well,
Tim, I've come across some hoodoo recipes lately for that recommend using red flannel in like mojo bags and stuff.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess that it's just an American motif, right? I mean, it's kind of has its own kind of archetypal kind of power and influence over people.
Well, that was my original thought, that it had something to do with this, the great American experiment and
Right. Yeah.
Manifest Destiny and Paul Bunyan, who is actually
Right.
Canadian, but that whole thing.
Don't tell the Minnesotans that, man.
Right. Yeah. But then you start getting cases from Europe and Australia, and you start to question that. Get a lot from England, quite a few from Australia. So, is it specifically American? I don't know. In the past, it was a big thing with like harlequins in the paranormal. And they have that kind of diamond pattern, and if you just take that red check and turn it sideways, it'd be black diamonds on red. So, is it something to do with the checkered pattern? And that's what Keel always called it. He called it the men in checked shirts. I'm sure we're talking about the same thing.
Mm. And you and Josh have explored all the tartan stuff too.
Yeah, I'm poking at it. I mean, there's a lot there, and there's, depending on who you ask, they mean different things.
I mean, it's also possible too that even though it may have started as an American thing, it may have worked its way into the sort of collective unconscious.
True.
So you get the bulk of sightings in the early 90s and stuff from America, but then eventually you start seeing it in other places.
Yeah. We are good at exporting culture.
But it would be on an unconscious level, because no one really pointed this out as specifically as you have. Like, until you did this, Tim, no one was really talking about Flannel Man.
Yeah, not really at all. Nobody had any real kind of concept of it, even though there's that. Well, as I hear that weird Twin Peaks stuff.
True.
Yeah, I mean, it pops up. It pops up, and Keel did talk about, like I said, ghosts in checked shirts or men in checked shirts and stuff showing up in people's bedroom. It's in Mothman Prophecies. It's in a couple of his other stuff too. So it's there. I think Brad Steiger talked about it. Somebody sent me a link recently on an old Coast to Coast or something. He talked about it. So it was there. And by the way, I had a guy contact me and told me he invented that character 4 years ago or something. And
the Flannel Man one.
Yeah. And I said, you're gonna have to go back and change your story there, buddy, because I got it from some forums on the web from much earlier than that. And Allison actually went back and found the forums. So they were from 2009, 2010, something like that. So I didn't name them. I just pulled the name off of that forum. That's what they were calling them there. But we started talking about them organically, because that was like, Allison was the big skeptic. And that was what I was using as to illustrate, like, even you've seen something paranormal. You've seen this Flannel Man. And I mentioned it kind of offhandedly on the show, and then it just blew up. People started contacting me left and right. Oh, I've seen him. And it just snowballed from there. So it was a very organic thing, that we started talking about it at all. And then it kind of turned into a bigger thing for us. Which
Yeah, you kind of really stumbled into this.
yeah,
But also too, like Allison really was kind of the root of this because she had her own weird experience a while back too. So
way back in the 1990s.
Mm-hmm. I wonder about the whole thing about him looking surprised that people can see him, whether or not it's like an out-of-body traveler. Like, I've wondered about that myself.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite possible, but it's not just Flannel Man. A lot of these characters that people say visit their bedroom at night seem to have the same reaction when people like see them. They look surprised. Even some of these weird like inky octopus forms people see, and they'll look at them and they'll like draw back when the inky octopus realizes that they can see them. They'll like kind of draw back, like what So,
you're seeing outside the simulation.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, the weird inky octopus thing is just as scared of you as you are of it?
Yeah, that's the question, right? Whether like that reaction is partially, the exact same thing going on their end. And are they like seeing us and like, that's like the oh shit move, on their end.
Yeah, they're like having a nice inky octopus day floating around, and suddenly there's a human looking at them.
The two realities combined.
And they're doing a podcast in the alternate dimension.
Which, by the way, speaking of inky octopuses, Seriah, I did want you to know that I watched Color Out of Space the other day.
Yes. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it's a good movie.
Yeah, it's intense as hell.
It really is. Well, I mean, Nicolas Cage gives the right amount of cage rage in it, but also cool that it's Richard Stanley, which I think this actually is the only Richard Stanley movie that I've seen. Although I have seen the documentary about the kind of aborted making of The Island of Dr. Moreau.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I'd really like to see his documentary that he did about Rennes-le-Château, or the south of France. He lives in the south of France.
He's supposed to be doing 2 more Lovecraft movies. I forget what the next one's going to be. Everyone wants the third one to be the Mountains of Madness, but who knows?
Yeah, it's supposed to be I was reading about that it's supposed to be a trilogy.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting movie. Having watched that and watched Mandy, which is another messed up Nicolas Cage movie.
Mandy is such a metal movie; it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Have any of you guys seen Mandy?
I've not.
I saw it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's like a psychedelic death trip.
You also get enough Cage rage in that, walking around with this it's a weird. It's almost like 2 movies in one. It's like one.
Don't give it all away, Adam.
One half of the movie is like this weird movie about a cult, and it's very slow for the first hour, and the second hour is just this really messed up revenge movie.
And he has this Celtic frost scythe.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah. Is that where that's from? Is that
is the Celtic frost logo?
Oh my god.
It's like,
wow.
The last sort of genre movie I saw was The Lighthouse, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one about where they disappear. Or no?
It's the 2 guys alone in the White House.
Yeah.
Lighthouse.
Okay.
That kind of go nuts.
Yeah, that's an excellent movie.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good.
It looked good. There's one that takes place in a lighthouse called Cold Skin that's also very Lovecraftian. That's very good.
This is by the guy who did the V-Vitch.
Yeah, Robert Eggers. Right. Yeah. The V-Vitch.
Yeah, you can't call it the witch. You call it the V-Vitch.
You gotta call it
okay,
the V-Vitch.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is also very, very worth seeing.
Yes, The Witch was great.
If you like the kind of folk horror kind of stuff. My dad sat down and watched we'll get off movies here in a second, but my dad sat down and watched Midsommar the other night, which
Ooh.
That is an incredible movie. Oh my God.
It definitely has its slow crawl moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for a horror movie, it's probably one of the most beautiful movies I have watched in a very, very long time.
It's a great horror movie. I would never sit through it again.
It's absolutely, but visually, it's just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, absolutely.
What did you think of Hereditary, Seriah?
Same thing. Like, I thought it was a great horror movie. It was a little bit slow, but I would never sit through it again.
Really?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask everybody a question. I really like the genre of like this like occult horror, murder, etc. But after a while, it kind of gets to me that like every single context that like weird spirituality or the occult is presented in a film is like always about murdering people and sacrificing people.
It's always negative. Yeah.
And not just negative, like the worst, just like, oh, sacrifice. And I mean, 50, however many years later, it's like, seems to be just kind of like a trope. And I like a lot of the movies, but it kind of bothers me in a way. I don't know.
Yeah, it kind of furthers the whole satanic panic kind of narrative that you start with, like The Exorcist and Rosemary's
Or like,
Baby.
here's a group of people who have some kind of ancient traditions preserved.
Right.
Of course, they sacrifice people. That's their main concern, And
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when I was, playing Pagan Fest with Stone Breath, I never met a pagan who didn't love Wicker Man.
True. I love it too.
I think they like that danger. They want that danger.
Not the Nick Cage version.
No.
Let's caveat that.
That's one of the few really bad movies from Nick Cage.
I think people like that air of danger associated with them. There's something dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
I recently watched all the. I'd never even heard of it. I forgot who talked about it, but I watched the Children of the Stones. That's really cool.
Oh, that
like
series.
There's actually a BBC Three podcast version of that's excellent.
Oh, really? Okay. Cool.
Yes.
Like an audio drama?
Yep.
Isn't that an older thing, Sergio?
Yeah.
70s, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the film series was, or the TV series was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen anyone like talking about ley lines so much in a series or film. It's pretty cool.
They did some cool series. The Owl Service is another cool one. We watched that.
The Owl Service?
The Owl Service is another BBC series from the 70s, I think, or early 70s.
Okay.
It has that same kind of vibe to it. It's really cool.
Yeah, it is cool. But I was just wondering what you guys thought about that, because it's, I don't know, like you never see this stuff presented in any other form, it seems.
Well, I mean, on one hand, I get it, because it's like I often say, we have a lot of antique shops that have either oddity shops in them or specific oddity shops around here.
Yeah, and people are like attracted to the grotesque.
Well, you can't walk into one without them having a ton of Catholic stuff. And as a Catholic, I walk in, I go, my religion is not your oddity. This is, on one level, it's like, stop doing that. On the other, it's like, I don't care. You're not going to hurt it. You know what I mean? Like the greater part of me is like, go ahead, sell the stuff in your oddity shop. I don't care. But there is a part of me that sees that and goes, you wouldn't do that with Muslim stuff. Like you wouldn't do that with Islamic things and call it an oddity. You call it, something else, but you wouldn't put it in your dark oddity shop. But Catholic stuff's fair game. Part of me is like sees that and goes, but then the other part of me is like, well, they're not, whatever. You can't hurt it. This stuff's pretty invulnerable. Go ahead and sell it in your oddity shop. I'm done.
Right.
Plus, what kind of horror movie would it be if no one died?
Right. Well, I mean, why don't we have like a Norse pagan like romantic comedy or something?
Well, there was the one that Kevin Smith did, Red State, that was a horror movie about a cult, but it was a Christian cult.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And in Mandy, they're like a Jesus freak cult, but they're like hooked to LSD. They're like they're still like they're described as Jesus freaks. So you do see some movies like that, but yeah, for the most part, they're still kind of like it's just whatever. It's what sells, like the weird occult kind of stuff, and tinging it and making it look like it's negative.
I mean, Jim Jones took out a
sells.
lot more people than Charlie Manson did. Like,
Yeah.
we're just taking tallies there.
Right. That's
Well,
very true.
did Charlie Manson actually kill anyone himself?
Well, let's say he convinced those people to do it. I'm not.
Right.
I never killed anybody. I got friends that kill people. I've always had friends that kill people.
Do the hand movements or I'm out.
Good old Charlie, man. So I wanted to run this by you guys. This is just kind of like a simple story. Like I said, I got a couple stories, and I really kind of geek out on the reincarnation stuff. It's something that I haven't really explored very much on this show, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on this. So where's the cat coming from?
That would be me.
That's what I figured.
Strange familiar.
Yeah. Which one is that, Seriah?
That is Jack. Jack can be very, very vocal.
How many cats do you have over there?
Just two.
Just two? Okay. I thought you had more for some odd reason. So, this young mother on TikTok, which is a platform that I refuse to use.
Oh, I've seen your videos on there dancing around.
No, you caught me.
Lip syncing to Ariana Grande or whatever.
Yeah, I was lip syncing to "Never Gonna Give You Up, Never Gonna Let You Down." Which, by the way, I saw on Facebook tonight. Somebody they're doing like the deep fake thing where like you animate the faces, and they did like H.P. Lovecraft singing that. It was bizarre. All right, so a TikToker has been left horrified after her 4-year-old daughter gave a detailed description of working at the Twin Towers on 9/11. Don't worry, Seriah, I'm not going to read the whole thing. Responding to another TikTok, which said, "Tell me a time when your child told you a past life story," Riss White opened up about a disturbing account given by her young daughter a couple of years ago. On September 11, 2018, Riss had been scrolling through social media and came across some 9/11 memorial posts. One of these posts showed an image of the Twin Towers, which appeared to strike a familiar chord with her daughter. So the little girl pointed to one of the towers. Riss believed it was the North Tower and said, "Hey, Mom, I used to work there." When Riss asked her when this was, her daughter simply responded, "Before." And Riss said, she said that one day she was working and the floor got really hot, so she stood on her desk because the floor was too hot. And she said that her and her friends were trying to get through the door, but they couldn't open the door, so she jumped out of the window and flew like a bird. Riss then went on to clarify that the child had never before heard about 9/11, making the details of her story all the more eerie. And then there's another little small account from another lady said, when one of my kids was 3, she randomly turned to me and said, "Hey, Mommy, remember that time I was an old lady and got hit by a car and died?" I've heard this one. And another mother said they commented and said, "My daughter is 4 and told me so many times that her and her 2 other girls fell in water and sank to the bottom, then fell asleep, and now she's here."
Yep.
Okay, so this is something that I am like deeply, deeply fascinated in.
It's very common.
We talked about this on a Patreon episode Serfiel and I did when we talked about the what's that Life After Death documentary that's on Netflix? You guys know what I'm talking about. Surviving Death. There's actually a whole episode about this where they talk to Dr. Jim Tucker, who's pretty much the foremost researcher in the United States about this.
Yeah, he's been researching this for decades.
Yeah, he was a protege of Ian Stevenson, who actually studied a lot of the cases in India that said that they were of children claiming that they were actually they had lived a past life.
That's a little different because those kids could be primed for it there, since it's part of the religious system.
It's part of the religious system,
but it's more interesting here when you're not really primed with it.
Right. But of course the parents just kind of take it as a matter of course.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there's and of course we've talked about before, like that's how they choose the Dalai Lamas, right? Yeah. They go and they bring like certain possessions of the former Dalai Lama, and apparently the child picks those possessions, and then they know that that's the reincarnation of the former Dalai Lama. So the Dalai Lama just keeps getting reincarnated and reincarnated. But, you know, this, I mean, I'd like to get you guys' thoughts about this. And like, Tim, I mean, you have children. Do you ever experience anything like that? Was there anything weird that that was said? Because I think that this happens more than people think it does, but it probably gets, you know, filed away in our brains, and we don't think about it. I know a friend of mine said that her little boy said something really weird to her, and she actually texted me and said my son said something really weird, because she knows I'm into this stuff, and she was like, and I was like, well, it could be what it is. I mean, see if you can find out some more info.
Back in the heady days of having a day job,
Oof.
yeah. One day I think I was at work, and my son was very young then, and Allison told me that he pointed over by the door and said, "Daddy's standing there." And Allison's like, is he? And he's like, yeah, and he's wearing this. I had a certain shirt with cassette tapes all over the front of it, just a graphic pattern of cassette tapes. And he said I was wearing that shirt. And I've never, my lovely dear skeptic wife has never let me wear that shirt again since.
It freaked her out a lot, huh?
So I was either bilocating or something. And then another time he pointed to the corner of the room and said there was a blue woman, a blue Mary, which you may explain by, I have tons of pictures of the Virgin Mary around. So it may or may not have been the Virgin Mary, or that might have just been the word he used to describe her. So there's a blue Mary in the corner, and he has sleep paralysis stuff now. And I'm not allowed to talk about it too much, but one time, one of the things he said he saw was a blue woman. So he knows I love this stuff, so he just doesn't give me that much information on it. He handles it way better than I do. He's very matter of fact about his sleep paralysis stuff, but he talks about basically these visitors coming to see him all the time. And I'm dying for him to tell me, and he won't. He just, he withholds this information.
Does he take it as a kind of like a matter of course or something? Is that what it?
He's very matter of fact about it. He's very
right.
No big deal, and won't tell it. Like, I try to get him to come on the show and tell his stuff. He won't do it. He's not interested in doing that. But that sort of blue female character did make another appearance, which reminded me of that thing he said he saw in the corner when he was young. But that was the only really stuff that makes you go, huh, when they were little.
Right. Seriah, you got any thoughts on any of that?
Well, I mean, as far as kids remembering past lives, I don't know any other explanation that can fully explain that. I mean, the best other two that I could even come up with would be that they're somehow focusing on information the rest of us are not. But it seems weird that it would be just about one person. Or the spirit of somebody is attaching themselves to this child and giving them that information, and they're confused what's them and what's not. I think the simplest explanation is they were actually that person, and what they're telling us actually happened. I mean, these cases have been verified. I mean, people have found who the kid is talking about when they've gone looking. If they have enough information, they can actually find that, yes, this person existed. The most famous one is the one they did the documentary, The Boy Who Lived Before, where he went out he was a World War II pilot, he said.
Yeah, that's James Leininger. Yeah.
Yeah, and he died in the Pacific, and he was able to identify the other people in his group from back then, like he walked right up to them like they were old friends. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's hard. I mean, there may be something else going on that we just don't understand, but I think lacking any other information, the easiest explanation is these people are reincarnated.
Right.
Does it seem like there's a overabundance of, I guess to say important type of people versus just like regular? Is there a lot of just like regular Joes? Like I was just some guy who worked at a factory
In fact, I don't think I've ever heard someone say they're a reincarnation of anyone famous from a kid's.
Not like that, but like, a World War II pilot or like was in that documentary me and Adam watched, like a Hollywood person that was pretty low level, but still like, something.
Yeah. Well, they had to do some serious digging though to find him.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
Tucker did some serious digging to find that guy.
Now, when you use hypnosis to recover past lives, you get lots of Cleopatras and
right.
Hypnosis creates memories. It doesn't recover them.
That's what it reminded me of. And a lot of like the early spiritualism would be like channeling historical figures. Like, we've got Napoleon on the line. He says, blah, blah.
And I don't think channeling is an example of contact with life after death. I just don't. I don't know exactly what it is because it seems like we are contacting something, but the information that comes from these contacts is pretty banal. It's just basic, simple stuff. They're not giving us the answers to the universe or anything. Except with rare exceptions like Jane Robert Seth, who actually gives you practical instructions on how you can manipulate reality that work.
I knew Seth was coming. Seth is
the exception to the rule.
If you have Seriah on, Seth is going to get mentioned. But yeah, the channeling stuff in that, like we talked about this in that episode, the Patreon episode we did. The channeling stuff was the least valid to me in that whole entire documentary. And oddly enough, it was the most focused on. There were like 2 episodes about it, but Seraphiel, says that you can't ignore that because that is part of the history.
Well, and like my take is that there might be a lot of other things going on that, it's creating this laboratory, and by like priming everybody, toward belief with things like them seeing a person talking in different voices or even, little trickery going on, they might be actually accomplishing some other kind of weird spiritual thing or creating other phenomenon.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a form of psi is what it is. And whether or not there's another entity involved is hard to say, but I mean, it's hard to say with any of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What about the Seth material really strikes you as being valid?
Oh God. Seriah. I mean, the fact
I don't know if I've ever really asked you this.
So I dismissed channeling all out. I mean, what channeling I had seen were things like Ramtha and stuff like that. I picked up a Seth book for like $1 at a used bookstore.
Ramtha and Jay-Z Knight, there's an agenda there, but
And at the same time, her brainwaves do alter when she's channeling, which is interesting. So there's something legitimate going on, regardless of what the agenda might be. So I started reading through Seth Speaks because I was researching near-death experiences, and people kept referencing Seth, but not any of these other channels. Just like, why does Seth keep coming up? So finally, I opened up the book to the section on what happens when you die and realized that in 1971, he was describing basically what people report in near-death experiences. Moody's book didn't come out till 1976.
Yeah.
Not only that.
That's Life After Life.
Right. And and Seth was also pointing out little things like, people don't all die at the same time. There's no specific point of death. Some people leave their bodies before they're dead. Some stay in their bodies long after they're dead, which then, was lining up perfectly with new research that was being done in the late 90s, where a heart surgeon was like, it's weird because some of these people didn't die. And they still had a near-death experience, whereas others died and some died and didn't have a near-death experience. And I'm like, son of a bitch, he just explained that back in 1971.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was always one of the things that was, to me, was like, why doesn't everyone have a near-death experience?
Yeah.
At this point, I would say that's probably part of it. I think part of it is that the near-death experience is also a spiritual experience that helps us hear. Because people have these experiences, they come back changed. So maybe they were just on the wrong path and they needed to be corrected in some way. I mean, look, if you look at Cheryl Lee's stuff, she was, going in one direction with her life, and after her near-death experience, she went in a completely different direction in her life.
Yeah. Well, it's very similar to alien contact and alien abduction too, in that
yes,
it tends to change people. So the same effect is going on with both phenomenon. I would probably say that they're really one and the same. There's
just something connecting them. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that was the thing that broke the nuts and bolts hold over me, was Kenneth Ring's book on that. But the other stuff with Seth is like, at one point, okay, so one of Crowley's things was beware lust for result. So his thing is like, do your magical ritual and then just forget about it. And I always thought that doesn't make any sense. Like, wouldn't you want to focus energy on it to make it happen? And here's Seth talking about how we form reality around us, saying how we don't do it consciously. These conscious images need to drop to the unconscious to actually have any effect. And I'm like, son of a bitch, did he just explain lust for result? There's a lot of stuff in the Seth books that paired up with stuff we didn't know about when she was channeling this stuff back in the late 60s and early 70s. And I tried to debunk it. I'm like, okay, so there's got to be stuff out there. And I mean, occasionally you'll see some of the ideas floating around in rare places, but there's a lot of stuff in the Seth books that we didn't know about back then that he's talking about through her.
Yes.
And none of it was like, oh, that's just completely wrong. He also didn't claim to be omniscient. Jane Roberts herself said, I don't know what Seth is. It could just be a part of my unconscious mind. I have no idea. I remember when I talked to George Hansen about it, she had said, or Seth says, that the being that she's channeling is a part her and a part him. That they're not, that he can't talk through her without some of her biases and things like that. And Hansen said, yep, I'm pretty sure that's exactly how channeling works.
Yeah, there's a symbiotic relationship going on.
Right. So he would always say, some of this is not coming out the way I want to say it because Jane's biases on this stuff is altering.
Right.
Little known fact.
Plus I don't know everything.
Little known fact, lust for results, early Iggy Pop outtake.
Really? Interesting.
No.
Okay.
Lust for Life was the Iggy Pop song.
Yeah.
Hey, Tim, something I was thinking about really quick with all that, like in out-of-body experiences, certain psychedelic experiences, alien contact, you have this these transformations of people. But what about like Bigfoot and some of these other things? Are there those like transformative type of experiences where Bigfoot comes along and your life changes? I mean,
there are, but they're rare. They're nowhere near as common as the UFO contact experience. And that's the big question, when we do these, surveys, like Where the Footprints End, where we take these different paranormal things and look at them and then look at the Bigfoot experience. There are some stumbling blocks, and certainly one of them is that's one of the ones we noticed, that it does happen. You can find cases where people's lives have been changed, where it's very much has those components to it, but they are in the minority. A lot of the times the end result is just basically somebody's afraid to go in the woods, or they stop hunting for the rest of their life. They don't have these like great life-changing, where they become artists where they weren't before, or whatever the case is.
Like he's just kind of there on the periphery for most of them.
Yeah. And this might be, something to do with what the wild man is or represents versus what these other things are or represent.
But then there are those experiences where Bigfoot is kind of like this messenger for the earth. That's almost like a lot of the contactee stuff. With like, look, you humans are messing up, destroying the environment, and
right.
So those would be the ones that are more transformative.
Yeah, often those people have really had a kind of a moment, and but yeah. So what is it? I don't know. Like at this point, I'm kind of playing with the idea of Sasquatch being representative of our past self, and and the grays sort of being representative of our future self, like all in one
Yeah.
spectrum kind of thing. It's not that simple. None of this stuff is that simple, but that's sort of shorthand for the kind of ideas I'm playing with as far as what these sort of archetypes represent.
Because we're always exploring these similarities, but that's one facet that does not seem similar.
Yeah, it doesn't have. I mean, that's if you make the big Venn diagram, that's going to be, that area is going to be one of the few that it crosses over, but the sort of shared space isn't that much.
But I guess ghosts aren't as much like that either. So
true. Yeah.
Weird.
Well, ghosts probably encompass a whole variety of experiences.
Hey, Seriah, I have a family member who recently saw a plasma like what they believed was like a craft or looked like a jellyfish in the sky. I know you've been talking about plasma for a while, intelligent plasma.
Uh-huh.
And when I read her account, that was the first thing I thought about. So she says that she saw, along with another person, this like jellyfish like thing in the sky that kind of just was like tumbling over and really strange. She didn't use the word plasma, but I asked her, would plasma be a good word to describe it? And like both of them were like, bingo. Yeah, that's exactly what we felt like we saw.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with the real anomalies people see in the sky. Plus, I don't know if I can get the article up right now, but there's the military is apparently working on creating plasma objects. Let's see if I saved it.
Okay.
I don't think it was that far away from a military installation, too.
Well, it's what, Santa Cruz?
Something like that.
Find out what's around there.
Here it is.
Southern California. I mean, there's a lot of military installations there.
Does the Navy's missile-fooling plasma tech explain recent UFO sightings? The U.S. Navy recently patented a method for creating 3D images in midair using plasma. Technology is meant to create a heat source, drawing hostile infrared-guided missiles away from their targets. It could also be theoretically partially responsible for a series of UFO sightings reported by Navy strike fighter pilots in 2004 and again in 2014 to 2015.
Yeah, I think if we're hearing about it, they already have it.
Yeah,
mastered, right. It reminds me of that like Glimmerman technology that we were talking about. That the military absolutely has.
The aspect of the technology that raises eyebrows, however, is the use of laser-induced plasma filaments to create floating images in the air. It is possible to generate a 2D or 3D volumetric image in space. This is analogous to rastering of an electron beam in a cathode ray tube-based television. One potential embodiment, a laser system would be mounted on the back of an air vehicle, such as the beam can be rastered using optics and mirrors to generate a large ghost image in space. This ghost image would appear to detract the homing missile away from the tangible air vehicle.
Wow.
So who knows how long something like that has been in at least testing.
2004 was the same time as the Nimitz. That was the year the Nimitz sighting happened. So
yeah, I think that's what they were referencing.
Think that could be like one of those plasma things.
It could be. I mean, it could have been. It could have been any number of things. I suspect, partially because they released it, that it's probably our technology.
Right.
I think if it was a genuine unknown, and I'm sure they have them, I don't think they're going to release that.
It's weird.
They want disinformation. They don't want people to figure this out because they probably don't know what it is either.
I think they're crowdsourcing where people are seeing these things so they can figure out if it's one of theirs or a Russian or Chinese thing.
True.
That's what I think, honestly, is going on. Yeah, because they want to know who's messing around, and they're not concerned about it being spacemen from another planet. They're concerned about it being Russian or Chinese, and they want to know where it is and where people are seeing them, and then they can go, okay, we were there that night. That was us. Don't say anything. They don't need to know that, but
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Sergio, you had another story that you wanted to drop on us.
Yeah, I've seen people revisiting this Dyson sphere stuff. I've been seeing this stuff get shared again.
That's a vacuum cleaner thing.
Yeah, I think it's like a vacuum cleaner of consciousness and energy.
Before we go into that, though, I did want to state that there does seem to be something with plasma related to these weird experiences. Andrew Collins wrote a great book called Light Quest that postulates that UFOs are basically plasma intelligence. And he makes a very solid argument for it. It doesn't necessarily encompass, it could encompass everything, but it has a lot of we don't know if this is real type of stuff, like ideas, theoretical ideas type of things. But they do, in a lot of cases, plasma can look like metal craft, as well as lights. And lights are the main thing we see in all of these encounters.
Right, exactly. That's one of the, that was one of the things that was used to debunk the Travis Walton case, is he got zapped by some kind of plasma. I think that's kind of what you think about it.
Yeah, I think that I don't remember them saying that. But yeah, I think he may have got discharged from a very large plasma of some sorts. And that area is like one of the areas that has the highest number of lightning strikes in the U.S. Mm-hmm. So having an extraordinarily large ball of plasma there isn't that much of a stretch. And if you get hit with that much electricity, it may not kill you, but it is going to impair your ability to create short-term memories for quite a while.
Well, see, the thing is, it's just people talk about ball lightning as if it's it's just ball lightning. But Serfiel, you said you've seen ball lightning, and it's I'm sure that's weird as hell in and of itself.
Yeah, I don't know if it is ball lightning. I think it was more paranormal, but it very well could have been.
I watched the storm right next to our house, where you can see the thunderhead, the side of the thunderhead from my house, and there was ball lightning just zipping in and out of it. It was crazy, and I wish I had a camera back then.
What does it look like?
It looked like a ball of lightning with like arcs of energy moving around it. And it was big.
It didn't appear solid. It was almost like you could see through it, or
no, it was bright. It was very bright. It was yellowish white. Weird. But it was balls, and it would move out of the thunderhead and then go back into the thunderhead. And I don't know if it was just one ball of it doing this, or if there were numerous. But I sat here with my mom, and we saw a ton of them.
Crazy! Wow.
Guest we had on Strange Familiars 2 weeks ago, I think. We saw the phasing Bigfoot. She said she saw ball lightning come into her house one time, and it glided along. I guess it was a metal handle or something on the stove, and it kind of went to that, glided along that, jumped to the sink, and then out the window again. But just right through her house.
Yeah.
So how big is it? Is it just this big floating orb? I
think she said it was she says on the show, and I might have this wrong, but I think she said softball sized.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of jumped up.
Yeah, it sounds like it followed metal things. It went from one metal thing to another almost
which makes sense.
Yeah.
And were there storm conditions outside, or?
I think so. Yeah, I interview so many guests that I tend to lose the details. And other than I remember her phasing Bigfoot account perfectly because Bigfoot. But
yeah. Of course.
I tend to lose some of the details of some of the stuff because I'm seriously, sometimes it's 3, 4, 5 interviews a week. I'm talking to people.
That could go with what I saw, because one of the things that made me think it was paranormal when I saw it is that it rushed through this backyard and seemed to hop over a metal fence.
Yeah, she was kind of as far as it being paranormal or not, she was kind of on the fence a little bit. She was kind of hey, people say that's just ball lightning, but do we know what if ball lightning isn't something more than it is? She was kind of
we don't agnostic. We don't know what ball lightning is.
Right.
Mysterious.
Yeah, we just know it happens.
Right.
But other than that, what is it really? What causes the light to become a ball, to become an orb? Like why does it happen? Like I get that it's like attracted to metal. I mean, that makes sense, but like, what is the effect of how it occurs? Do they know?
I know they can create it I think in the lab at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're saying they a lot now. We got
I know. The
Scientists can create it in a lab, I believe.
Researchers.
They got that ball lightning.
That doesn't mean that it explains, like, because they can create it under controlled conditions, it doesn't explain why it pops up in non-controlled conditions, if that makes sense. Like, there's so many different factors, because sometimes, it's a, stormy night, like what I saw with coming out of the storm, but other times it's a perfectly calm night.
Right.
With nothing going on. The other thing is that I completely forgot what the other thing was. Oh, you got stuff like the Marfa lights, or the Brown Mountain lights, which also seem to be plasma formations in specific areas. So, we don't understand what that is either.
Yeah, some people think that it's caused by tectonics.
And it could be.
Yeah. I'm sorry, researchers and scientists think that it's caused by plate tectonics.
They got all kinds of stuff. They got
the
that
Illuminati.
I heard they got it.
Yeah, they got it.
You get earthquake lights too, and Paul Devereaux also showed that the majority of UFO sightings in the UK were happening along fault lines.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a connection there between all this stuff.
Yeah. I've heard that. I've definitely heard that before.
Electromagnetism.
So Dyson spheres.
Yeah.
This is a little bigger than your normal ball lightning.
Yes, this is a giant structure that would encompass an entire star or solar system, I think. I think it's an older idea, but this stuff's kind of getting kicked up around again because of this transhumanist Russian guy named Alexei Turchin has been talking about this project he's had for a while called a Roadmap to Immortality. And I'll read a little something about this. This is from Nerdist because the Popular Mechanics article is behind a paywall. So we'll just read this one here. Russian life extensionist Alex Turchin experienced the loss of a classmate firsthand when he was young. Ever since, he's been on a mission to figure out how to make humans like Greek gods immortal. And the latest iteration of the transhumanist roadmap to immortality involves, of course, a veritable sci-fi blend of superintelligent AI, universe simulations, and Dyson spheres, the hypothetical megastructures that completely encompass stars. Turchin and fellow transhumanist Maxim Chernyakov outlined several future paths toward immortality in a paper they recently self-published. The paper, which comes via Popular Mechanics, is called Classification of Approaches to Technological Resurrection and offers several ways people could theoretically not only defy death, but more fantastically come back from the dead. So there's this like multi-row flow chart with their immortality roadmap here. But I thought the stuff about Dyson spheres was kind of interesting. I'm going to just skip ahead to that.
Well, the problem with Dyson spheres is that the amount of material to make a Dyson sphere is just completely unrealistic.
It seems like just such an old idea. And the thing that I was thinking is that, it's like this idea, some of the singularity ideas in transhumanism as well, that eventually we will turn all matter into a computational device. But really, with a lot of spiritual people and people into quantum physics as well, the universe, I think, is already pretty much one giant computational device,
right.
But yeah, it just seems so like kind of hokey and really old science fiction-y that you would need to harness the energy of an entire sun, and that a civilization is going to necessarily want to exponentially keep growing in population or need for resources. It's just like all these assumptions that seem really rooted in like old industrial civilization.
Yeah. There's a cool podcast called The Bridge. And it's the idea that in an alternate world, they built a bridge across the Atlantic Ocean. And it's a good podcast, although they hardly ever update it. And I thought about that, and I thought, bridge across the Atlantic. And I'm like, there'd be a lot of issues because of, plate tectonics and stuff like that. I'm like, but can you imagine the amount of resources, like material, they would need to build a bridge like that? Like that's a normal bridge is bad enough, but across the Atlantic would be an astonishing amount of material. And then expand that to a Dyson sphere covering, a solar system.
Yeah, where's that going to come from?
Another solar system. And even that wouldn't be enough because, I mean, the solar system, is compressed into planets and stuff. So, I mean, it's a crazy idea that just, I mean, the amount of stuff you would need to make it work is pretty much impossible.
I was dating a woman in college, and we were laying around one day, and I said, yes, I want to go to the UK. And she says, okay, let's go. And I said, all right, can we drive your car? And she looked at me and she goes, can you really drive there? And I said, haven't you ever heard of the London Bridge?
Oh, shit.
Is that what that is? And I said, yeah, you just hop on the London Bridge and drive on over.
Americans.
That's beautiful.
She was a very nice person.
Americans.
Wow.
There is this really cool manga called Blame, and it is about this like AI ran megastructure that extends like out of the earth, I guess, that is just like building itself outward constantly. So there are like little human cultures within it who this thing is so huge that they, develop separately. And of course there's like all kinds of like mixing with machines and whatnot, weird classes of people and stuff who live in this thing. But like the main character is like traveling, through, almost like what would be equivalent to like the earth, but it's just like through this giant megastructure that just keeps building itself outward to eventually, I think like their goal is to eventually somehow like hack into this AI to stop it or something. So it's a really cool manga called Blame. And I'm not even like really into too much manga or Japanese animation, but the concept is just really, really cool. And it's great artwork.
Interesting.
What's your take on the transhumanist stuff, Seriah? I've never really heard you. I don't know if I've heard you talk about it.
I think the idea of putting ourselves into machines is not going to work. I think this is a materialist idea that they think that we are our brains. And it drives me crazy because there's literally no evidence for that.
Right.
And it's like, oh, we'll just download ourselves into computers. And it's like, so you might be able to download some level of what you are into a computer, but that's not you. I don't know what we are. I don't know what parts, how much of a person can you take away and it's still them. You see when people get transplants of like, different organs and stuff, they oftentimes pick up some of the traits of the person they got the organ from, which suggests sort of a holographic sort of existence that, the whole is more than the sum of its parts, and that all the parts contain a part of the whole. But if consciousness was generated by the brain, then I guess you could copy the brain and put it into a computer if you had an advanced enough computer. And that's the idea they're going with. And I don't think that's the case. I think the brain is just a processor of this reality for whatever our consciousness really is. At least on a greater scale.
So this researcher, I think their whole plan that they've got this roadmap is that they can achieve immortality by 2100 through, but is dependent on the help of strong AI to give unlimited lifespan upgrade and create realistic simulations of artificial life, eventually leading to the colonization of the solar system and galaxy, and then to explore the universe. I guess it's just, it's weird stuff. It seems like a real ancient quest that has been, the foolishness of which has been detailed in many ancient texts. Like
there's a podcast called Everlasting Stories, and the guy wrote one of the stories. I think it's called Titan. I can't remember. But the basic gist of the story, he's just reading the story. But they had created an AI that was sophisticated enough that consciousness came into it. And I liked that idea. That was really interesting because one of the characters is talking to this AI, and he's like, well, you know, what's the first thing you remember? And he goes, oh, well, and he's going on about how he can remember his whole former life, like that he died as a human and then he reincarnated in this AI because it was enough to hold his consciousness. And I was like, okay, I'm all right with that idea. Like, that's an interesting concept.
Well, then the question would be, when you create something like that, if it is some kind of, you know, vehicle for consciousness to come through, is that necessarily going to be the same thing that we are?
No, it would be different because it would have, first of all, a more reliable memory, for one. It wouldn't process things the same way. So, yeah, it would experience reality differently.
But, I mean, if there is any kind of, you know, particularity or like sacredness to us and like the body and what we know of biology, you know, if biology is like this interface for whatever to come through that we are, you know, like if we create something different, it just terrifies me. Like, what is that? You know, what's going to come through? And
its view of reality would be probably very different than ours.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be a lot of natural empathy there because it would be processing things completely differently.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't have the connection to the world around it like we do. And I mean, most of our connections have been cut off anyway, unless you look at, you know, more native tribes and stuff who are still in touch with nature and the world around them.
Right. Exactly.
Not that I'm anti-technology. I love technology. I think technology is amazing, but I think that we can at the same time also reconnect with the natural world better.
Yeah, with like those singularity ideas that they want to like turn all matter into computation. I mean, it probably already is. It just seems like so much of this is like missing the point, and maybe the more we actually understand about ourselves, as science allows us to do that, you know, we'll kind of realize that this is kind of backwards.
Like making a matrix within the matrix, man.
Exactly.
Well, here's the thing. Is any of this stuff really going to happen, or is it just kind of just on the drawing board?
No,
you know,
it
just seems like it's just ideas. I mean, that's all it really seems.
I actually met a kid like 8 years ago when in a job, like he was like 19 or something, and he was like some little hacker kid, you know, and he like literally said, "Oh no, I'm not going to die." Like he was like totally transhumanist. That was his thing, you know, and he's just like convinced he's not going to die. And I'm just like, oh my God. When I first met someone like that, you know, this like really young guy, I couldn't believe it.
Seems very unhealthy. Seems
Yes.
You could die tomorrow, buddy.
Well, it also seems like a cult kind of mentality too.
Yeah, it absolutely
Just
is religious,
bit, you know? Yeah, right. It's its own religion. Remember that thing that we went to? Like it was like that Christian transhumanist thing that we went to, Seraphiel?
Yeah, I do.
And I was just like, I didn't know. I was like, it just was so. They were just trying to use as big of words as possible to where it just was.
But really, you know, like we've explored before, the Russian cosmos they had these type of ideas that are now called transhumanism, but they had them integrated into Orthodox Christianity. Like they had this weird, model of it that we are doing God's work and we're going to resurrect everybody. And so in effect, we're going to do, what's promised in the Bible, and everyone who ever lived is going to come back to life.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to find out the way to do it.
Yeah.
That's kind of what they said. Right.
Then I think most of them probably ended up in the gulag.
Yeah, they probably did. We need to talk about Jeff Ritzman. Seriah, I never had Jeff on my show. I know you had him on a bunch of times, and I think Tim, you had him on as well, right?
Yeah, I had him on for a brief segment, but we ended up talking after that, I think probably for about 3 or 4 hours. Just
that sounds about right.
Off recording, yeah.
Yeah. So just kind of you guys' memories of him, like what happened. It was very, very sudden.
Yeah, extremely sudden. He was, I found him not through Paratopia, which was his, podcast. I'd never heard of it. I found him through Project Archivist because he did a show on Project Archivist talking about his experiences. And I listened to that and I said, I need to talk to this guy. This guy's really fascinating. And there's stuff we share here in these experiences. And so I contacted him, after doing a little research and realizing he was kind of a big deal in all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, he's not going to answer me. And he got right back to me. He's like, I'd love to talk to you. And I'm like, cool. So the first time I had him on, we did a 3-part segment on his experiences. We may have talked about an hour to start. And then we did a 3-part segment. And then we talked for another, I think at the end, it was 5.5 hours. And we were going to stop. And then I found out that he was into metal. And then we talked for another hour and a half or something like that. And I was using Pamela at the time to record. And Pamela apparently stops at the 6-hour mark and the file crashed.
I remember that program.
Yeah. And so I was like, I got done, I'm like, oh my God, we were on for almost 7 hours. Holy crap. And I went to play it and just, open it up in Audition or whatever, and it wouldn't open. And I'm like, where's my file? And finally, I found out that Pamela would play it. Nothing else would play it. Everything else thought it was 10 seconds long, even though it was 4 gigabytes, because it must not have encoded the end of it to tell it the file was done. But Pamela would play it. So I ended up just playing it on Pamela and recording it on Audition. And I just went to bed. I'm like, all right, at least I have it. I'm not going to complain,
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, we connected immediately. And I had him on a ton of times in 2017. First, the next time I had him on actually was with Tim, when Tim was considering getting hypnosis, and I think Jeff completely talked you out of that.
Yeah.
And then I had him on with Greg Bishop a few times. The last time I had him on was to talk about Lodge 49, because that had become an obsession of his. He loved that show. Prior to that, I think he was on talking about Gettysburg and some ghost hunting he was doing there with some 3D rendering stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, his big things were Star Wars, the paranormal, metal, particularly Iron Maiden. He was a huge Iron Maiden fan.
Yeah.
And, and Lodge 49 at the end. I mean, he was a great artist, too. I mean, he was just phenomenal on the stuff he did. But a lot of the ideas he brought through to this stuff were very practical and very he was the one talking about things like liminality and looking how the trickster works and all of this. And, it just insights that nobody else really had.
Big influence on me and some of my views too, just from listening to those episodes. Like, he had a big influence on me. And when he actually, and so does Greg Bishop on my viewpoint. And when he actually did the show with Greg, that was like 2 different titans, just talking it out, which was great. But the whole liminality stuff and how that affects the paranormal, and how and how it basically causes things to happen, is really, really fascinating. And he had a lot of, just like a ton of influence on me personally. I never pursued getting him on, but he definitely was a great thinker.
He tried to get away from the paranormal stuff a lot. You know, it really screwed up his life. He talks about it on one of the shows. Really messed up his life, and so he would kind of dip his toes in, but he didn't want to get into it 100%. He was working on a book of his experiences, and I don't know how far that got along. And I don't know if his family is going to do anything about it, if, you know, like try and get it published or anything like that. He was working with a ghostwriter who I talked to, but I don't even remember who she was, or if he had stopped working with her and started with someone. I don't remember the details anymore.
Yeah, he reached out to me at some point and kind of asked me a little bit about book writing. If his family needs help getting his information published, you know, I'd consider it an honor to work on that. Just putting that out there.
So yeah, he was supposed to come to the last Albatwitch that we went to, which was they had one last year, didn't they?
They
Tim?
did, yeah.
But the last one you were involved with was pre-pandemic in 2019. Yeah, that's right. And he was going to come up to that because he wasn't that far away, and I forget what happened. He had some personal issues and wasn't able to make it. And I think that's actually the last time I talked to him was when that happened. And I was just like, oh, okay. Because I think we did the Lodge 49 thing. I mean, we talked on comments or whatever here and there on Twitter, but that was it. I didn't actually voice-wise talk to him, and I never got to meet him, which is incredibly disappointing to me because I really had held him in very high regard and really would want to actually meet him. And I didn't, he would always say he loved my show. Like, he'd just go on and on about it. And I'd be like, okay. And I had no idea if he was just blowing smoke up my ass or what, because when I posted on Facebook that he had passed away, and his son posted something along the lines of, thanks for being such a good friend of my dad. He would keep me and my mom up, to the early morning every time he talked to you, talking about the stuff you guys talked about. And I thought, okay, maybe he wasn't,
That's cool.
I mean, he was a really nice guy. I know a lot of people in the fields didn't like him, but that's because he called people on their BS.
Right. Right.
And because he was a jerk.
Another thing about him, and you mentioned this, is that he really wanted to try to get away from it. Like, he really acknowledged that the paranormal ruined his life because he got obsessed.
Yep.
And that was a big thing for me too, of just like looking at, like, it's fun to talk about this stuff, but you can't get obsessed with it because it will like utterly and totally just like rule your life. And I know people that this has happened to.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I did a show with him and Greg Bishop in fact, it's in the second, and I'll be putting it up tonight. So by the time people hear this, they can find it. It's in the second compilation of shows with Jeff. There's 2 or 3 with Greg Bishop, and one of them is keeping your sanity while researching this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Greg has been down those rabbit holes as well. So
yes. Yeah. And if it's not in that grouping, it'll be in the next grouping that goes up. I can't remember what I ended up putting in which one because I have something like 20 plus hours, I think, total, if I include the Patreon segments, which I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Because I just want to put all the stuff he was on up there, just so people can hear it and check it out and see what he was all about. Because he was very insightful about this stuff.
Right. Right. Yeah, he will be missed. That's for sure. And it was very, very sudden. And I think just very, very unfortunate that he's gone. He was gone far too early.
Yeah, I mean, it was only 53.
Yep.
Yeah, it's that one hurt. I didn't get to speak to him nearly as much as I wanted to, but the times I did get to speak with him, I just really love the guy. I just very enamored with his viewpoints and considered him someone I would go to when I needed advice on this stuff. He's somebody I would reach out to and say, hey Jeff, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think about this? Excellent person. I really liked him, and I will miss him immensely.
I should mention here something that I have not mentioned. It's kind of a double whammy to me, and this person I actually did know, Angelia Shear, who lived here in Tennessee in the Nashville area. She passed away. And I know that you guys don't know her, but she was the head of the Tennessee MUFON. Very kind, very gracious lady. Really knew her stuff. Had just published a book about high strangeness and UFO encounters and really looking into some of the cross section of paranormal experiences. Helped me a lot with kind of getting the first, helping kind of like promote the first Strange Realities conference back in 2019. Had some people come because of her recommendation. So, you know, it was kind of that happened back, I think, in February. And then Jeff Ritzman dies. So, yeah.
Well, Tim, the first time you came on with Jeff, didn't we figure out you had both been at the same guitar shop, like within a few days of one another or a few hours of one another or something?
Yeah, so Jeff, for a while, ran his own guitar shop. He built guitars. I mean, the guy was kind of a genius, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we figured out that, yeah, we kind of traveled in the same circles. He knew people I knew people he knew. He grew up not far from where I grew up. And was pretty familiar with a lot of the area I grew up in. And yeah, there was some kind of crossover with the guitar shop. I don't know if he had come into the guitar shop where I eventually ended up working, or I forget the actual, crossover there, but there was some very kind of synchronistic crossover with guitar shops and me and Jeff.
Well, I think that you had both gone to the same guitar shop in a very short period of time.
Oh, like actually at that time.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Because I think he mentioned, I went to this guitar shop earlier today, and you were like, I was there yesterday.
Oh yeah. I think it's when there was a guitar shop in Shrewsbury, maybe. I forget, but yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Yeah. But there was other crossovers too, like with him, like when he owned his guitar shop, and I may or may not have actually ever actually walked into his guitar shop because I know where it was. And it's quite possible at the time he had it that I would have walked in and I just wasn't a rock guy, and he had mostly rock guitars, I think.
Right.
And just kind of looked around and made my way out of there. But yeah. Now that you mention it, there was I think there was a guitar shop in Shrewsbury or something. And we had been there within, a day or so of each other.
I was very happy to get him into new bands because he was one of those people who was like, I don't like the sound of new metal. I don't like any newer metal bands. I'm going to stick with the old stuff. And after going to see Unleash the Archers, I was like, man, there's such a Maiden influence here. I bet Jeff would like them. And I sent him 2 videos. I'm like, here, check these guys out. And he responds with, I just bought their whole catalog.
I think death metal did that to a lot of the older heads.
Yeah, well, he didn't like the down tuning on everything.
Okay.
That was his thing. I sent him a couple other. I sent him a couple other things. He's like, this is all right, but I don't like the tuning on it. And then I sent him One-Eyed Doll, and I'm thinking, I don't know what he's going to make of this, because they're more like punk with some metal influences, and they're quirky. And he's like, I love this. This is amazing. And I'm like, yes, that's 2 I got him into.
Was that the band you guys were going to possibly go see that night of Albatwitch? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Was it the night of Albatwitch?
There was something about that because you were like, we can meet Jeff, and then because you were trying to go get me to see the band, and I was kind of like, I don't know.
Right. Yes. Okay. I couldn't remember if it was Albatwitch or just one of the times I came down to see you. Yeah, they were playing in Baltimore, and I was like, well, come out to Albatwitch, and then we'll go see One-Eyed Doll in Baltimore. And he's like, well, that sounds like it's workable, and it wasn't.
Wow, that old world is coming back soon, guys. We can all hang out and go to shows, and
that's right.
Really miss it. Yeah,
that's right, Tim. You can go to the bar because I know how much you love that. So, Sergio, you had some things that you wanted to talk about. Comparison of all our shows.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of bounce around with you guys because, there's so much crossover between our listenerships, and I know people usually seems like where did the road go first, I actually found Conspirinormal first, but I was, very, very soon after listening to both of y'all's podcasts as well. But just like, what are some things that characterize our mutual listeners, and maybe what people may want to listen to just one or the other, but not all three, and some things like that? I think there's probably a lot of funny observations we can make.
Well, I think one of the reasons I forgot that I pushed Tim into doing a podcast in the first place until he reminded me. But the thing is, like, when he sent me the first episode, I'm like, this is great, and it's totally different than what I'm doing. So for a while, I had Strange Familiars running on the feed for Where'd the Road Go, until he kind of blew up and took off on his own. But like, the shows are very different. There's some mutual coverage, but I mean, I think Where Did the Road Go is more varied than like Strange Familiars.
But you don't do conspiracy nor politics, as you usually say.
Right. I mean, there's been one or two shows in the history of the show. I did have Douglas Dietrich on, and I did have Paul Kimball on talking about 9/11 conspiracies because he didn't believe in any of them. And I had what I'd wanted to do with that is have him on that side, and then get someone who was, who did believe in the 9/11 conspiracies to counter it in a different show, but that never happened. But for the most part, I just leave that stuff out.
Yeah.
So what's your typical Where Did the Road Go listener versus Conspirinormal listener versus Strange Familiars listener?
And there's definitely a healthy overlap. Tim focuses more on the folklore, more on Bigfoot, whereas I'm unintentionally probably more focused on UFOs. It just turned out that way. When I started, I was more focused on lost civilization stuff, ancient cultures, things like that. But I mean, I think the people who really like the folklore aspect and stuff are totally going to focus in on something like Strange Familiars. You guys, I mean, there's a lot of overlap with us, but you also take on a lot of guests and subjects that I'm just not interested in.
And while UFOs proper don't necessarily show up in Tim's show, there's a lot of mysterious lights and similar kind of phenomenon. So
I think so. Shorthand, Where Did the Road Go is our like smarter older brother. but to break it down, it's more like I'm very interested in experiential things. I want to experience things myself, and sometimes I have the tape recording, when that happens. The recorder running when that happens. I'm still in the 80s. There's still tape running in my head. But other times I want to talk to people and hear what they experience. And that's probably the folklorist in me. Like I really, really want to document this stuff. I want to get it down. I feel like these stories need to, there needs to be a record of these stories. And it's almost like Seriah is almost like, okay, these things happen. We know these things happen. Let's talk about the possibilities why these things happen. And, maybe there's something behind these things happening and so forth. So, I think mine's more about the experience and his is more about the why. That's the way I view it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Because Seriah is always trying to really explore the mechanisms and the cosmology that would allow things to happen and how they're actually taking place.
And how consciousness works.
Yeah, really philosophical.
Yeah, I think if you listen to, there's some times where we'll interview the same people. And if you listen to our interviews, the questions we ask are different. I'm really I want to know what they saw, what happened when they saw it, what their impressions were at that time. And of course, there's some crossover. We both, ask some of these same questions. But, Seriah is going to get into more well, what's going on in your life, and what did you feel, and ask them sort of these questions like, do you think it could have been blank? Where I'm just let's document this experience, blah blah blah. so it's just two different approaches. I think they're both absolutely valid.
Yeah, I'm very much the same way when I talk to guests that have like kind of personal stories, in the fact that like I want to know what else has happened to them. Like, is there anything that because knowing what I know, that just how this, you have all these different type of phenomenon that is under the umbrella of all these paranormal phenomenon, and wanting to know, have you ever, so you had this weird UFO experience, you were abducted by aliens, what else weird has happened to you? That's usually the thing that I'm most curious about.
Yeah, and your show is just, I mean, it's so interesting to me because there is such a variety, and you'll have stuff, like you'll have the guy talking about the weird, dime store grimoires or whatever, 1 week,
Yeah.
and then the next week you're talking about something totally different. And so I like that. A lot. So, you're our weird cousin. So Seriah's the older, Seriah's the older brother who's been there, done that, and he wants to ask the questions why.
Even though I'm actually older than Seriah as far as podcasting goes.
Well, too bad. This is the way I do.
Yeah, but you're what, a month? You started yours like a month before I did?
No, it was probably about almost a year.
Oh, really? When did you start?
March of, the first show got posted on April 9th, 2012.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, almost a year.
Yep.
Because mine's January 2013.
I didn't say your age. I wasn't talking about your age. It's just, you're like our cousin. You're like our
Right.
We're your generalist cousin.
Yeah.
Yeah, who's
Well,
into that end,
see, that all kind of comes from my whole thing of just like how I was interested in several different things at the same time. It's probably a lack of focus on my part, but I was interested in the paranormal. I was interested in the conspiracy theory. I was interested in history. I was interested in how might those things intersect, and all those things really interested me. So that's kind of what I wanted to do. And a lot of it had to do too with just meeting all these different types of people at all these conferences. And I listened to podcasts for several years before I started Conspirinormal. At least a good 7 years, I think. I listened to podcasts, and I had all these different people that I had listened on several different podcasts that I wanted to talk to. So it was just really just like going down the list. Who do I want to talk to? I mean, that's really what it came down to when I first started doing it.
Wow. See, I'm such a baby then in this world. Like I started listening to podcasts probably a year before I started mine. And, I'm came along much later than you guys or Seriah.
Yeah, I just got lucky one night. I was listening to Coast to Coast, and I heard these guys named Ghostly talk on there, and I was like, I didn't want to pay for Coast to Coast. I later did pay for Coast to Coast, but I was like, I started listening to those guys, and they were one of the first, it was really an internet radio show that they just posted onto onto their website, and I would listen directly off their website. Like iTunes really wasn't a thing as far as podcasts, and World of the Unexplained was another one that I started listening to around the same time, and they were kind of that same way where they talked to all these different kinds of people. So just from listening to all these different types of shows, I just I want to talk to this ghost hunter, but then I want to talk to this conspiracy theory researcher, and it was just all that. It was just all there in my brain.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I started too. Except I got into podcast listening late. I mean, mostly because of Graham Hancock. I wanted to hear Graham Hancock talk.
Yeah.
So I listened to him on Coast to Coast because he actually put up a torrent of all his Coast to Coast appearances.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point I was like, well, he's probably been on, there's probably other shows, right? And so I started seeking out other shows Graham Hancock had been on, and then started going, there's probably other stuff people are talking about. I should see what else is on these shows, and went from there. But the thing that kicked me into wanting to do it, I mean, I wanted to talk to these people, but there was one that I'd listened to, and I don't really want to name it. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was awful. Every once in a while it was okay, but they would have guests on that I wanted to talk to, and then they wouldn't know what the hell they were talking about. And I'm like, why do they get to talk to these people and I don't? I need to start a show,
Right.
This is me when I hear people interviewing paranormal witnesses on other podcasts. I'm like, ask them this, and they don't ask. I'm like, oh, come on my show.
I actually, it was that combination of Coast to Coast and Ghostly Talk and all that other kind of stuff. And also to go into conferences. I went to a lot of like paranormal type conferences in that time period from like 2006 to like 2011. And I just met like just a ton of people.
Huh.
So
I didn't go to any of that stuff.
Yeah, that helped as well, which is why I always wanted to do a paranormal conference myself. So,
well, I crowdsourced some of the stuff, and I asked a lot of people that we all know what they thought. Our friend Chris Corey said that what he thinks unites all three of the shows is how even-handed we are, and that he feels like so much conspiracy stuff is soapboxy, and we don't really have like a big agenda or like weird kind of hidden narrative going on. We're not really, selling supplements or like snake oil or like therapeutic stuff or anything like that. Don't really have any big answers for anybody necessarily. So he likes that. Stephanie Quick says to not tell anybody, but she loves a little bit of conspiracy with her weird, which is why she likes Conspirinormal.
You just told like thousands of people.
Yeah, I know. Our friend Steven Davidowitz says he guesses that since he lived in the South during the Satanic Panic, he likes how we seem intellectual.
That's very good. I
yeah.
like that.
Let's see. We got Nate saying one knows Sasquatch is a government experiment. One knows it's a quantum dimensional atemporal phenomena, and the other is pretty sure it has something to do with fairies and flannel men.
Which one is me?
Right. Jennifer Campbell, who's a listener of all of us, says that Where Did the Road Go stands alone. She says that it's best when linking disparate voices on the subject. And I think initially people might consider your show more mainline UFOs and conspiracy show, an easing in point for the more esoteric ideas. And Strange Familiars was kind of like that for cryptids until the cryptid crowd blew Tim's spot up for being a non-physical Bigfoot guy. But other than that, I'd say I was asking one person and they were like, oh, well, I don't know what the other listeners are like because I'm so socially isolated, but thought we probably have that in common. Probably a lot of our listeners are socially isolated.
I'm sure that's in spades, especially over the last year.
Yeah.
I mean, my reason for staying away from conspiracies is it draws in too many people who just think they know everything.
Oh yeah, we know, definitely.
That toxic culture, just like, I don't want to invite that in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, I'm totally fine talking about this stuff, but like, look, no one knows. Knowing and thinking you know are two very different things.
Exactly.
Attracts all kinds of colorful characters. I think we have the most recovering evangelicals.
I guarantee I've got the most Catholics. I guarantee.
And I probably have the most in the other crowd, the agnostic atheist sort of crowd.
Probably, yeah.
Interesting.
And everyone definitely agrees that Tim has the best production value. And someone compared it to NPR for Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Seriah, I know, has the most natural disasters. I think so.
Let's keep it that way. I don't want any.
Yeah, he's in the middle of one right now. So
it's just a power outage.
As we speak. Well, it still hasn't come back on, huh?
They said 10:45. It is currently real time 10:10.
Well, just to say too, it's just like you guys, both of you guys have been a huge influence on me, just, in and of yourselves. There's basically like 3 podcasts that I really listen to religiously, and 2 of them are your 2 podcasts now. So
what's the third one?
13 o'clock, Jenny Ashford's.
Okay.
which is quite different from all of our shows.
Yes. Yeah. Well, she's more true crime.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But they will talk about anything because Tom gets really, really distracted, and they both get really drunk.
I will jump around. I mean, obviously, Strange Familiars and Conspirinormal are on my regular rotation when I want to listen to a non-story driven podcast. I love the Snake Brothers. I think their podcast is fantastic. Radio Mysterioso when Greg actually does it.
Right.
And I have a bunch, and I'm blanking on what they are, where I'm like, I should check this one out. I should check this one out. I should check this one out. A lot of times they turn out just to be nothing special. It's like, oh, this is okay, but I don't care.
Well, my other big podcasting genre that I listen to is history podcasts.
Yeah, I listen mostly to audio fiction just because it gives me a break from all this stuff. And I like stuff that has deep story driven stuff. Like I don't like the ones that are like a different story each time. Mm-hmm. I want like an overarching narrative that hopefully goes somewhere interesting.
Adam, you're going to have to give me some recommendation on history podcasts because I love hardcore history, but I haven't found another one that. Well,
yeah, the problem hardcore history is great, and I love Dan Carlin, but the problem is that he makes these epic 6-hour shows. And he takes forever to do them. I would highly recommend Mike Duncan's stuff.
I've heard that name before.
I actually tried to get him on the show, but he didn't want to come on because he thought he didn't want to talk about conspiracy theories. And I'm like, I want to talk about your book. I don't want to talk about and I send him all these emails. I'm like, all these shows. I'm like, dude, we're not that type of conspiracy theory show. But anyway, I still respect him. So History of Rome, which is like this epic, obviously history of ancient Rome. And then he's got this current podcast, which is Revolutions, which is about, every revolution from like the English Civil War, and now he's talking about the Russian Revolution.
Cool.
So those are really good. There's another one that I got into for a little bit called When Diplomacy Fails. That's just basically kind of like European history. And of course hardcore history. Whenever Dan Carlin puts out an episode, I'll usually listen to that.
Yeah, they broke down his thing on the cons into, I think they're 1 or 2 hour shows, so a little bit more easy to digest, and they made it a whole series.
Yeah,
like that way. They should probably, his old shows like that, they should probably do that with. They're way easier to digest as that, because I'm on the Supernova in the East now, and like some of those episodes are 4 or 5 hours long.
Yeah,
it's just,
that's his current one.
I fall asleep and I try to go back and find where I was and end up listening to half an hour I already listened to, and
right.
And I think that's another draw for me for audio fiction is so many of them are like 20 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm gonna drive to Ithaca. I'll listen to 3 of these. They're like the Snake Brothers make really long podcasts, and as much as I enjoy them, it is one of the things where I look and go, man, this is going to be 3 hours.
Yeah, the history podcasts for me are more like listening to an audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Than listening to like a show like ours.
And you can probably kind of find chronologically where you were just based on the time that you remember them talking about.
Right. Yeah, so I highly recommend Mike Duncan's stuff. His stuff is really interesting. I mean, stuff I didn't know about, like the Mexican Revolution. I didn't really know much about it till I really listened to his series on that.
Some of that stuff is like they just didn't teach it to you in school.
Yeah.
Not public school anyway.
Yeah. There's another one called The Ancient World that's very well worth listening to as well. I haven't got caught up with that in a long time, but
what's your opinion on long format, Tim? Do you have an issue with it, or what's your preference?
I don't personally. I just go whatever it is, it is. I try to make sure it's at least 50 minutes, but if it's an hour and a half, fine. If it's an hour and 3/4, fine. But I know people have contacted me and said, like, they want basically the commute. that's the length of the show they want.
Right.
Right.
What about 2 hours and 16 minutes now?
I mean, like I said, I don't have a problem with longer
Some
shows.
people love it the longer it is. I mean,
Yeah.
I
I
kept
do.
getting requests. I kept getting requests to put up those UFO history shows in one file.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. The longer a podcast, the more I like it.
And it was 20 plus hours, I think, when I added all the Patreon segments in.
Wow, that's
and I was
crazy.
just like, I couldn't even upload it to YouTube in one part because YouTube has a limit at 12 hours now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually mix down in Ableton and won't let me export past like 3 hours.
What's the longest we've done? I think maybe there was one that was like,
I think the ones that we bust up into two with like Alan Greenfield.
yeah, I think that would have been like probably 4 hours.
Yeah, I think we've touched like 4 or 4.5.
Yeah, but we split those shows up.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what I would do. Like the first time I had Jeff Ritzman on, I mean, we went over 3 hours of actual show, and I'm like, all right, so this is going to be like 3 shows.
It's kind of cool sometimes when that happens because you're like, okay, I got some like wiggle room for next week.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
Yep. A breather for once.
The one before this one with Richard Spence, that was like almost 2.5.
yeah, that man can lecture.
He really can. And he doesn't miss a beat either.
You know, one of the other things I did when I started my podcast, I mean, because initially it was I want to talk to these people like Andrew Collins and Robert Schock and stuff like that. But then I started looking through my bookshelf and going, what stuff was really influential on me that I've never heard anyone talk about, which is where I pulled Patrick Harper and Trickster and the Paranormal. Hansen from. Because, like, I contacted Harper. I'm like, there's no way he's going to talk to me. And he's like, I'd love to come on. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then when I get him on, I'm like, why haven't I heard you on other shows? He's like, no one's ever asked me.
Yeah, there's a tendency to just kind of go on some of these shows to just go for, like, the more popular stuff.
Sure.
And
Demonic Reality is a game changer in this stuff, and no one's had him on.
Yeah. I'm basically afraid to have him on because I like just really kind of locked up when you had me and Josh and
Ren
and him on.
That was
and you're
a good
like,
one.
okay, guys, go. I'm like,
He's so personable, though. He's not someone who's going to, give
it's
you a hard time.
super cool. And we bonded over music, and he liked to. When I was talking about my Marian animism thing, he's like, "Oh, I'm going to start using that." So,
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but I just don't know, like handling the whole interview myself. I don't know if I could because I'm just like, man, this guy is like, he's just intellectually just a giant,
Yeah. Well, so was Hansen, and Hansen was intimidating. Like if I have Hansen on, I want somebody. That was actually one of the things I was planning with Jeff Ritzman is for Jeff, and Hansen to be on.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably the next thing I was going to do with Jeff at some point, because that way, he could take some of the brunt of talking to Hansen, who, he knows his stuff, and Jeff knows Hansen's stuff better than I do. So I would feel a little less pressure on me.
yeah.
But again, I said to him, I'm like, have you ever been on Coast to Coast or anything? He's like, they don't want me on Coast to Coast. He's like, they want me to distill my, 600-page book down to, a few easy to digest bits.
Yeah.
He's like, it's not going to happen.
But even if like a lot of these authors create really dense academic stuff, they're still usually pretty good conversationalists. So, they are able to filter down, not filter down to the Coast to Coast level, but definitely filter down to like could be on one of our podcasts.
Oh, absolutely. But again, a lot of these people, no one ever asked.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, Richard Thompson wrote this great book called Maya, the world as virtual reality or whatever, something to that effect. And I said, oh, that was really good. I should have him on. Oh, he died last year. Great. And he lived in Binghamton. He was like an hour and a half away from me. He went to Cornell.
In closing, let's do the great announcement. Strange
okay,
Reality.
My next book is. Oh, you mean something else? Oh, sorry.
Well, we will talk about that too. But
Adam is really an AI.
Yes, I know. I don't actually exist, guys. I never have. I'm just I'm this is why, like, Rob and Serfiel, they just turned me on. They just turned the computer on, and I just exist in holographic image. Anyway, we wanted to announce, since we got both of you guys, and both of you guys are going to be involved, about the Strange Realities 2021 and what we are going to do. So we have set the dates. We are doing October 15th, 16th, and 17th in Nashville. And what we are going to be doing is a kind of like hybrid event. So because we really don't know what is going on as far as like Corona, although things seem to be getting better, we still don't know. So we're still kind of like, what are we, like 7 months out, Serfiel, I think right now. So we are still just kind of like watching that situation. But at the very least, we will kind of have like a command center where we did our first Strange Realities conference back in 2019, which is SIR there in Nashville, and we will be doing it from there.
Right. So the stream will be looking more like if you've seen the 2019 videos,
right,
with people on stage, the people who can be there physically, etc.
Yeah. So we're going to be selling tickets quite soon, and we're looking at the prices. But these two gentlemen are actually going to be returning. This is going to be Tim's third year, and Seriah, this is going to be the second year. And Seriah, you and I were talking about possibly having you do some like emceeing some roundtable events for us.
Bring some Where the Rogo flavor.
Yep. And possibly doing interviews. So we will have tickets up soon. This is going to be a 3-day event. There's going to be a in-person package, and there's going to be an online package only. So you do not actually have to come to Nashville. You can watch this from the comfort of your home if you don't feel like coming, but we are going to have a kind of, right now, limited amount of tickets available for in-person. So
Adam in this package is a band.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah, think about it.
And Seriah derails the whole announcement.
Yes.
They want to know how much Adam in his package is.
Yeah. That's the big announcement, guys, we're glad to have you both coming back.
Yeah, I've made no decision whether I'm going to be there in person yet or not. It's going to come down to how things look, I guess, as we get a little bit further into the summer. But I'd like to be there, and the better part of me is thinking I'm going to be there. But we'll see.
We'll get you that banjo this time.
If I come, you may see the wizard staff, because I think I might just camp this time and show up and go back to my tent, and I'm more comfortable in the woods.
Nice. And Seriah, you're thinking of coming out? Possibly.
Yeah, that is the plan.
And we know how much you love country music, Seriah. So
we may or may not drive together. We had talked about that before.
Yes, I'm totally down for that. That'll be fun.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
As long as you can drop me off at the campground.
And we've got time to figure that stuff out, guys. All that logistic stuff. Just, we are going to be equipped to actually stream this thing. So whether the speaker is going to be doing it from their own home or doing it from SIR in Nashville, we will know hopefully over the summer.
Awesome.
So we're trying to just kind of look at the situation. So far, things are looking a lot brighter than they were definitely a year ago. So
absolutely.
If things don't get completely derailed, I would think that most things will be more or less fully open by then.
Yes. I would assume so. So stay tuned, guys. Hopefully by next week, we will have an announcement on our pricing, and we will have a place to go to get that. Probably that's going to be at strangerealitiesconference.com, just like it was last year. And there will be options for either being there, coming to Nashville, or watching from home. So either way, you guys will get to see it.
I'm excited. I love Strange Realities.
Awesome. We love having you. And it's going to be great to hopefully to have you both there. All right. I think that's it. I think we're just going to go ahead and close out the show, Seraphiel. Guys, please tell everybody where they can find y'all, your wonderful podcasts, and Tim's like awesome books that he does.
You can find me and my podcast at strangefamiliars.com. All that contact information goes right to me. You can also find links to my Etsy shop there, where you can buy all my books. They all come signed if you get them from Etsy, including my art book, Apparitions, Illustrations of the Other. That book is not available on Amazon. My others are. You can find all of them on Amazon. If you don't mind dealing with the evil giant, Amazon. I get lectured because I mention Amazon, but Amazon is responsible for a good part of my income. So Amazon. You can make up your own mind whether you want to deal with them or not. But if you don't like, you can always get them directly from me via the Etsy store.
Get Tim's books. They're awesome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, they are. And Seriah?
I don't have awesome books yet.
Well, you have awesome other things.
wheretotherroadgo.com, and hopefully I can make absolutely no guarantees, but hopefully I will have one of the two books I'm working on done by the time Strange Realities happens.
Cool.
Okay. Awesome.
I've been, and honestly, as much as I hate to say it, Jeff Ritzman dying has been kind of a kick in my butt, because he wasn't that much older than me, and I'm kind of like, I need to get at least one of my books done, preferably both of them, before something happens to me, because you never know.
I understand the feeling. Yes.
So I've been working diligently, jumping between the two books, the one on my personal experiences and the one on new ways of looking at all this weird stuff and consciousness and everything else, and just kind of depends what mood I'm in.
Cool.
All right, guys, that's it for the show. As far as we're concerned, Seraphiel, tell everybody about our Patreon and what we have there.
You can check out a new Patreon exclusive episode every week on patreon.com/Conspirinormal. Just tomorrow, we're doing our, I believe, third Mystic Crew Hangout for the $10 and up folks, and the $20 and up gets you a VIP experience at the Strange Realities Conference, as well as these exclusive Patreon-only Conspirinormal t-shirts with the alien head with the fez. Just check us out on patreon.com/Conspirinormal.
All right, guys, that's it. Thank you for listening, and we will be back next week on Conspirinormal.
If you would like to help the show, please consider becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Conspirinormal, or leave a one-time donation at Conspirinormal.com. And please check out our YouTube channel, Conspirinormal Podcast.